everything that we're arguing about is about causality and human behavior. But then if I think about it, I will say, wait, hang on a second. That choice I made over here was shaped by factors and forces over there. And all of these factors and forces over here were shaped by my choices over there. In other words, it's perfectly balanced. But how much does it have to cost before you say, yeah, I don't know, maybe we should think about that? Like 1 billion? 2 billion? 5 billion? 50 billion? At what point in time would you say, I'm going to walk us through how difficult it is to straddle the line where we understand that freedom, free will, and structural factors and forces are always in play at every single moment. This is a class about understanding causality of human behavior, okay? And everything in the world of everything that we're arguing about is about causality and human behavior. We want to know why people think the things they think and why they do what they do and why they feel how they feel. And when you're in a profession like mine, what we're doing is we're trying to discover the answers to that. And we want to know not only about individuals, but we want to know about groups. Why do certain groups do the things that they do and not other groups? And, so we're always trying to investigate the source of the causality. And we're arguing over that all the time. We have arguments about how to address homelessness. Well, it's all about causality. Well, what causes homelessness? And then we have come to different conclusions about what causes homelessness, and then we argue about what the solution is, or racism, or whether racism is really a problem for people. So we want to understand human beings, and we want to sort of get there and dig into it and this kind of thing. But we're almost always, when you get into one of those late night arguments with your friends, it's almost always over causality. There are two things. And we call this lots of different things, choice and chance and so on, but I'm just going to go with really free will and determinism, or free choices and external factors. So the idea is that our free choices are what primarily shape our lives. That no matter what happens in the world, we have the ability to make choices that are different than the ones that we make. And so however I got here, there is just a long list of choices that I have made to get me right here at my age to be a professor in this classroom. A long list of choices. Over here are the external factors and forces that shape our lives. And all of the external things, the parts of my life, where I grew up and who my parents were and everybody I met along the way and things that happened to me and a litany, a myriad, a wide range of things that I don't even see that affect me being a professor in this classroom right now. So two things, and we're in balance, always, that, things happen to me. I'm a man. I'm straight. I'm not disabled. I'm an American. I grew up in Ohio. I speak with this particular dialect or accent. I'm white. One thing after another, all these things that shape me. I never experienced homelessness. My mother wasn't disabled. My father died when I was 9. My mother wasn't home a lot to even raise me. So I spent so much time, starting at the age of 9.5, raising myself. That really impacted who I am. It shaped in very direct ways the fact that I'm here today. Okay? So all of these things, there's a long list of sociological factors and forces. there's also a long list of choices that I made in my life. So here's what the conversation is going to be about today. It's going to be about holding the balance. Because if you don't, notice it's not or, it's and. And the smartest way to see this is to see that these two sets of variables, these factors and forces, are equally balanced out. And it's really, in the long run, in individual moments, I could say, yeah, the choice I made here was really essential. Or that thing that happened to me was really, really important. In any one given moment. But then if I think about it, I will say, wait, hang on a second. That choice I made over here was shaped by factors and forces over there. And all of these factors and forces over here were shaped by my choices over there. In other words, it's perfectly balanced. Both are happening. So in sociology, what we do is we tend to look at the ways in which human beings are shaped by these larger sociological factors and forces. Like, we tend to look for those things because that's what we do. And we also look at choices because that's really important. But as a profession, what's really interesting to us is the ways in which people's lives are shaped by things that they don't see. Okay, that's why we're always talking about things like racism and discrimination and poverty in particular, wealth, power, all of these things that are operating behind the scenes that a lot of people will say, like, oh, why are you always focusing on that? Because we want to understand how these things, the whole field emerged as a way to understand how these things really shape people, right? Opportunity. How does opportunity shape things? The occupation of your mother or your father or whatever. This is what we do. So here, go to the next slide, if you will. So we do things like this. We're like, hey, you know what? These giant sodas that y'all are drinking all the time, you can drink the giant soda. That's fine. But we've run the numbers. We've analyzed in large groups, in entire societies, the impact and the cost of lots of people drinking those big giant sodas on a regular basis. And what we see is, man, it's really costly. It costs all of us a lot because it has a negative impact on public health. In fact, it costs us in the billions of dollars. It costs society for people to drink these diet sodas. And so people like me come along and we say, hey, look, man, we really ought to think about curtailing the use or the consumption of these big, huge diet sodas or whatever they are, these carbonated fruit sugar drinks that we're drinking all the time because it really is costly. And then people come along and they say, well, wait, you can't curtail people's behavior like that. Like, you can't do that. And we say, yeah, okay. Well, let's balance it out. When can we? So, we start to kind of add up the costs of soda. At what point, it costs money, billions of dollars, it costs us as a society, right? Because it's healthcare. You got to pay. When people get sick later in life, we pay for that. And, that's what happens. People are not just dying in the streets here. In the end, you will get some kind of medical care, and we'll pay for it. We all pay for it. So it's going to cost money. And we can all say, like, yeah, but that's fine. We can have diet sodas or have sodas, And then we say, okay, but wait, but how much does it have to cost before you say, yeah, I don't know, maybe we should think about that? Like 1 billion? 2 billion? 5 billion? 50 billion? At what point in time would every person in this room say, Yeah. If it's going to cost us that much, I think then maybe we should ban them. And maybe some of you would say, no, we should never ban them under any circumstances. People should be free to drink diet soda if they want. And you might be one of those extremists that would say, yeah, and people should be able to drive as fast as they want on the streets of State College. Because if they want to drive 100 miles an hour down College Avenue, then you should be free to do that. But of course, you don't do that. Everybody has some point in which they're going to take freedom away from other people and say, you don't get to have that free choice. Okay? So let me give you an example. Secondhand smoke in public health. The parks in State College, you cannot smoke a cigarette in those parks. Even if there are no children around, you cannot smoke a cigarette, secondhand health. So we do curtail human behavior. We do that. So what we do, we see these structural factors and forces, and we say, you know what? This is good for society, or this is bad for society, and so what we need to do is we need to have some kind of limits or enablements on human behavior. This is what we're arguing with all the time. If you listen to all the policies coming out of Washington, it's just this, constantly, okay? So people like me who are trained to kind of look at some of this stuff and say, you know, man, personally, what I can see, the giant sodas that people drink they're more problematic than secondhand smoke in these parks around the country. You're outdoors, kids are rarely going to be taking that in, but these sodas, this is actually a problem. So maybe you want to think about it. And so what we're doing all the time, so you got people like me then, we're standing in this space of causality and structure, and we're like, I don't like to have my freedom impinged upon. I really don't. I like to be able to do the things I want to do. But I'm willing to have my freedoms impinged upon. Like, for example, I won't drive 40 miles an hour down College Avenue. I won't do it. Even if you tell me you can, I won't. But tell me you can't, because I don't want other people doing it too. That's fine, right? But I got a lot of other things where I'm like, I don't know about that. And in fact, the ideal society is a society in which people are as free as they can possibly be with some constraints on behavior, because we always have constraints on behavior, okay? All right, so this is what we're wrestling with all the time. I'm going to walk us through how difficult it is to straddle the line where we understand that freedom, free will, and structural factors and forces are always in play at every single moment. Because generally speaking, what happens is we go over into one camp and we spend much more of our time thinking about those things. Like, but these people had a choice. These are people in prison, but they made a choice. And in the end, you sort of plant your flag there. In the end, they made a choice. And what I will say is, you know what? Of course they did. I got it. There's no question about that. Yeah, everybody make choices. You all make choices to be here or to not be here. Some of you won't do the readings and watch the videos for the exam, and so you won't do well. You made a choice. But at the same time, every example of people making a choice, we can find a whole range of factors and forces that are also in play. And so we're going to have a conversation in which we try to walk through how these two things are operating always at the same time. And if you can do that, and if you can remember it, you will be a whole lot smarter. You just will be. Because you can't, and that when sometimes you see me like in this class, I feel like I'm really wishy-washy. Like I'll say one thing and I'll say the opposite. It's because this is in operation with me at every moment.